There are individuals who think the state auditors are basically incompetent at auditing the city's books. Do you share this same opinion and why?
Well, I'm not going to cast the entire state auditor's office in one brushstroke, but I will say that the last state audit that was done here in the city, in their exit interview at the city council meeting, they told us that there were only a couple of very minor write-ups, that they found no major problems, and Tom Herzig, one of the other council members, and I actually asked them to meet us outside the city offices later on to discuss more detail. And what they told us was that there were accounts where errors in the 4-digit range, thousands of dollars, had been made in both directions, and because they more or less balanced out at the end, that they found that to be acceptable. I asked the guy who was telling us that if his wife ran their checkbook like that, if he would find that acceptable, and he was unable to answer that question.
I know that our clerk treasurer has passed every audit that she's been subjected to. They popped in and they did an audit on cash on hand, and it came out to the penny. I know that there's a show that goes on with the present council that at every meeting they come up with some last minute question and ask for some last minute information from our clerk treasurer, and they've had 2 weeks to present this. Now it is up to the mayor to decide whether she has to respond or not. And sometimes he said no. So why continue on? Our books pass. What can I say? If you're looking for problems, you'll probably find them. The information you just divulged about thousands of dollars being off, never heard of it.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
It's in the audit. I'll give you a copy of it if you like after the meeting. As far as the council coming up with requests of the city clerk treasurer, that's very true. I would not call it a show. I would not call it grandstanding. I would call it a level of frustration that grows when the same information that is promised to you at the next meeting doesn't appear at that meeting, or the meeting after that, or the meeting after that, with the hope that finally so many other things will pile up on the agenda that the council will forget those things and move on to something else.
What experience do you have in budgeting and management skills?
Well, in management skills, like I said, I've managed a cab company with around 85 employees, and the computer dispatch company had far fewer employees, in fact about the same number that we have here, 9. It did have a large budget, and I had to purchase, rent, set up the entire system. It was brand spanking new. And I had to also travel to Vancouver, British Columbia to do all the breakdowns with the maps and how the system pops up. And if you ever happen to get into a cab in Seattle and it's computer dispatched, or you get one in Portland, it's the same system. And it sends the closest car, and it's pretty magical how it does it. As far as budgets, to be really frank, I have some experience with that, but I have also spent a lot of time with Mary and plan on continuing to do so. But the budget is set by the city council. It's presented by the mayor and the clerk treasurer, but it is decided by the city council. They set the items, they determine water rates, they determine sewer rates, and the mayor doesn't do that, folks. That's not his job, and they're not going to let it go to him either. It's the mayor's job to administrate the budget once it's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Thanks, Heidi. In the hospitals I've worked at over the last 20 plus years, I've been responsible for a total of 5 different computer conversions. I installed the computer networks in the Hood River Hospital and the Mid-Columbia Medical Center Hospital from the ground up. I've managed staffs of 8 people in California and about 12 people in Mid-Columbia Medical Center. I've had to work with outside companies, contract agencies. I've had to submit RFPs to get vendors to come in and bid on projects. I presented multi-million-dollar budgets year after year to boards of directors. I've had to explain where that money all goes. You might guess a lot of computer budgets have a lot of zeros behind them, and especially in a hospital environment, a lot of people kind of want to question how that works. You have to go to bat and explain to them in relatively simple and easy to understand terms where the return is going to be on that investment. I've been able to do that, and I think a lot of that background will apply here in the city as well.
How would you attempt to control our city's budget? And if major budget cuts are necessary, how would you approach it?
Well, actually, the way the budget process works in a city run like ours is the mayor and the clerk treasurer are responsible for putting together the preliminary budget. And they pass that to the city council goes over it, hopefully they have enough advance time, they can spend some time looking at detail and get some questions answered. And they decide whether it looks prudent and should be approved, or they can send it back to the mayor and the city clerk treasurer and ask them to make some changes in it and bring it back again for further shot at approval. If there are situations that arise where it's obvious that the budget is not going to be met, then the first rule is to try and bring that information to the city council, which is the legislative branch of our government and the only branch of the government that's authorized to make those kind of changes, with the background information and some recommendations on how that budget might be amended or altered to try and make it work. If you get to, you know, DEFCON 4, where drastic measures are called for, then it's, you know, just like any other business, private or public, you have to, you know, go through your list with all your people that you've got in your staff and see if there are voluntary reductions that can be made. And if not, then you are forced to find places to reduce the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Well, controlling the budget is, that's worked out with one, knowing how much money you're having coming in. I can say that in the past 5 years, finally, the city has reserves, which it did not have previous to that. Currently, I think we're sitting on about 1.3 million in reserves. Now, each one, that money is set aside for different things, but it is there. And that's the very good news. The bad news, the economy has definitively affected our environment here. When we have homes that are being repoed, they no longer pay water bills because they don't have any. They no longer pay sewer bills because they don't have it. And we no longer have the income from those homes. And that has a dramatic effect too. As far as the cuts that would be made, I would say we'd have to look at financial outlay for capital improvements rather than staff, because we're working with bare bones. It takes 3 public utility workers to go down into a manhole cover to keep from getting a $40,000 or $50,000 fine.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
I agree with Jerry. I didn't say that we have to cut staff. I said that budget cuts would have to be made. There's a lot of little buckets full of money there, and you have to look through them and see which ones can afford to take the hit with the least impact on the residents of the city and the future potential of the city to maintain its viability.